What if the most powerful medicines you could ever use were already growing, or could be growing, right outside your back door? What if, for generations, your grandparents and their grandparents knew exactly which plants to reach for when the fever came, when the joints swelled, when the stomach turned, or when the spirit needed settling, and somewhere along the way, that knowledge was quietly discouraged? Not banned outright, in most cases, just made inconvenient, made unfashionable, made to seem dangerous by the very industry that profits from your not knowing. You've felt it too, haven't you? That quiet suspicion. That sense that something was taken from you. Some inheritance that should have been passed down around kitchen tables and garden gates, and wasn't. Today, I'm going to show you 20 plants that have been used by healers, farmers, monks, and grandmothers for thousands of years. Plants that certain powerful industries would very much prefer you didn't grow yourself. Some of them have been quietly restricted. Some have been buried under warning labels. And at least one of them, I'll get to it near the end, was once so revered by an ancient civilization that they built entire temples in its honor. Stick around, because number 7 carries a compound so potent that modern researchers have only just begun to catch up with what medieval apothecaries already knew. And number 17, well, number 17 might be the most quietly suppressed healing plant in the entire Western world. This is not medical advice, but it is your heritage. Let's get into it. Number 1, comfrey. The bone knitter long before orthopedic wards and plaster casts, there was a plant the ancient Greeks called symphyton, meaning to grow together. We know it today as comfrey. Healers across the Roman Empire, the British Isles, and medieval Europe kept comfrey in their physic gardens as a matter of basic necessity. By around 900 AD, Benedictine monks were cultivating it in monastery gardens specifically for the repair of broken bones, torn ligaments, and bruised tissue. They called it knit bone. That name tells you everything. The reason comfrey works the way it does comes down to a compound called allantoin. Allantoin stimulates cell proliferation, the rapid division and growth of new cells, which is precisely what tissue repair requires. It also contains rosmarinic acid, which has well-documented anti-inflammatory properties. Together, these compounds support what the monks observed empirically. Applied to the skin, comfrey seems to encourage healing in the tissue beneath. Research published in peer-reviewed journals has shown that topical comfrey preparations may reduce pain and swelling in sprains and muscle injuries significantly faster than placebo treatments, with some studies suggesting improvements of up to 35% faster recovery in soft tissue injuries. The compound works transdermally, meaning it penetrates through the skin to reach the affected area. The practical application is simple. Comfrey leaves, bruised and applied as a poultice, have been used for centuries on sprains, fractures, and bruised joints. A comfrey-infused oil, made by steeping dried leaves in olive oil for 4 to 6 weeks, can be applied to sore muscles and stiff joints. Note that comfrey contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids, which may affect the liver when taken internally over long periods. It is best used externally, not consumed as a tea or supplement. Think of comfrey as the quiet engineer of the plant world, the one that shows up after the damage is done and begins, patiently and persistently, rebuilding what was broken. Number 2, elderberry. The immune sentinel in the villages of rural Europe. There was an old saying, plant an elder tree by your door and illness will never enter your home. The elder, Sambucus nigra, has been woven into the folk medicine traditions of the Germanic peoples, the Celts, and the Slavic nations for well over 2,000 years. Hippocrates himself, writing in ancient Greece, referred to the elder as his medicine chest. And Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century AD, cataloged its uses so extensively that it fills several pages of his natural history writings. What the ancients observed empirically, modern biochemistry has begun to explain. Elderberries are extraordinarily rich in anthocyanins, the deep purple pigments that function as powerful antioxidants and that appear to interfere with the ability of certain viruses to replicate and attach to human cells. They also contain flavonoids, called quercetin and rutin, both of which have demonstrated immune-modulating properties in laboratory settings. A meta-analysis of multiple randomized controlled trials found that elderberry supplementation substantially reduced the duration and severity of cold and flu symptoms, with some participants recovering up to 4 days faster than those in the control group. Another clinical study found reductions in upper respiratory symptom severity of approximately 33% compared to placebo. Growing elderberries is straightforward in most temperate climates. They thrive in moist, well-drained soil and begin producing berries within 2 to 3 years. To use them, make a simple elderberry syrup. Simmer 1 cup of dried elderberries in 3 cups of water with a cinnamon stick and a few cloves for 45 minutes. Strain, cool slightly, and stir in raw honey. 1 tablespoon a day through the winter months has been a household staple across cultures for centuries. Think of the elder tree as the immune sentinel standing at the gate of your household, a guardian that nature placed there long before anyone thought to put it in a capsule and sell it back to you. Number 3. Valerian. The sleep restorer in the 1st century AD, the Greek physician Dioscorides prescribed valerian root for insomnia, palpitations, and nervous agitation. That prescription was still being honored in European herbalism 1,000 years later, and then another 1,000 years after that. Valerian, Valeriana officinalis, has been one of the most continuously documented medicinal plants in the Western tradition. Medieval monks grew it in their infirmary gardens. The Saxons used it in their healing preparations. By the 18th century, it was a staple of apothecaries across England. Valerian root works primarily through its effect on GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, which is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter in the nervous system. Compounds in valerian, including valerianic acid, appear to inhibit the breakdown of GABA, allowing it to remain active longer and producing a calming sedative effect. This is, incidentally, the same basic mechanism exploited by certain pharmaceutical sleep aids, though valerian achieves it through a gentler, non-addictive pathway. Multiple clinical trials have examined valerian's effect on sleep quality. Research suggests that regular use, typically over a period of 2 to 4 weeks, may significantly improve sleep onset time and subjective sleep quality, with some trials showing improvements in sleep efficiency of up to 40% in individuals with mild insomnia. To prepare it at home, dry the roots, then steep 1 to 2 teaspoons of the dried root in a cup of hot water for 10 to 15 minutes. Drink approximately 30 minutes before bed. Be aware that valerian has a distinctive earthy smell that some people find strong. This is normal and is a sign of the active compounds. It grows well in most garden settings and prefers full sun to partial shade. Think of valerian as the night watchman of the garden, the one that quietly steadies the nervous system so that sleep can do its ancient restorative work. Number 4. Milk thistle. The liver's oldest ally around the year 77 AD, Pliny the Elder wrote that milk thistle juice mixed with honey was excellent for carrying off bile. He may not have known about hepatocytes, or oxidative stress, or the cytochrome P450 enzyme system, but he was describing, in the language of his time, exactly what modern hepatologists have confirmed. Milk thistle supports the liver, the plant's active compound. Silymarin, a concentrated flavonoid complex found in the seeds, has been shown to act as a potent antioxidant, to help stabilize liver cell membranes, and to stimulate the regeneration of liver tissue. It appears to inhibit the entry of certain toxins into liver cells and to accelerate the production of new liver cells to replace damaged ones. Research has demonstrated that silymarin may help reduce liver enzyme levels in individuals with liver stress, markers that indicate cellular damage, with some clinical trials showing reductions of 20 to 50% in key liver enzymes over periods of several months. It has been studied in the context of everything from alcohol-related liver injury to exposure to environmental toxins. Milk thistle is one of the easiest plants to grow. It is hardy, drought-tolerant, and will reseed itself year after year once established. The seeds are the most medicinally concentrated part. They can be lightly crushed and added to smoothies, sprinkled over oatmeal, or infused in oil. A traditional preparation called milk thistle tea is made from the crushed seeds steeped in hot water for several minutes. Think of milk thistle as the faithful custodian of your liver, the organ that quietly filters everything the modern world throws at you, and that deserves, perhaps more than any other, a faithful protector. Number 5. Holy basil, Tuls. The sacred adaptogen in Ayurvedic tradition. one of the oldest continuous systems of medicine in human history, dating back at least 3,000 years. There is one plant above all others that holds a place of spiritual and medicinal reverence. It is called tulsi, what we in the West know as holy basil. In Hindu households across the Indian subcontinent, a tulsi plant grows in a special planter in the center of the home's courtyard, tended daily, honored as sacred, and that practice has continued, unbroken, for millennia. Tulsi, Ocimum tenuiflorum, belongs to a class of herbs known as adaptogens, plants that appear to help the body maintain balance in the face of physical, chemical, and emotional stress. Its active constituents include eugenol, rosmarinic acid, and a range of volatile oils that modulate cortisol levels, support adrenal function, and calm the body's stress response systems. Clinical studies have found that regular use of holy basil preparations may reduce markers of psychological stress, improve cognitive function under stress conditions, and support healthy blood sugar regulation. One controlled study found that participants taking holy basil extract experienced a 39% improvement in general stress symptoms compared to placebo. You can grow holy basil in any sunny windowsill or warm garden bed. It is a tender annual in cooler climates, but grows robustly and prolifically. The simplest use is a daily cup of tulsi tea. Pour hot water over 6 to 8 fresh leaves, or 1 teaspoon of dried leaf, steep 5 minutes, and drink quietly, slowly, in the morning. Think of tulsi as the plant that has stood in the center of the home for 3,000 years, not by accident, but because every generation rediscovered for themselves that it works. Number 6. Red clover, the forgotten hormone balancer. Before the pharmaceutical industry existed, before hormone replacement therapies and synthetic estrogen compounds, women in the agricultural communities of 18th and 19th century Europe knew something that their doctors, had they been consulted, might have dismissed. They knew that red clover, the humble field plant their husbands grew for livestock, had a particular effect on the symptoms of the change of life. Hot flashes, night sweats, mood fluctuations. Red clover, taken as a tea or infusion, seemed to ease them. The reason we now understand is isoflavones, a class of phytoestrogens, plant compounds that interact weakly with estrogen receptors in the body. Red clover is one of the richest sources of these compounds in the plant kingdom, containing 4 distinct isoflavones: formononetin, biochonin A, daidzein, and genistein. Research has shown that red clover isoflavone supplementation may significantly reduce the frequency of hot flashes in menopausal women. Some clinical trials report reductions of 30 to 44% compared to placebo. Other studies suggest potential support for bone density and cardiovascular health in postmenopausal populations. Red clover is extraordinarily easy to grow. It is a nitrogen-fixing perennial that improves your soil while providing you medicine. Dried blossoms make a pleasant, mildly sweet tea. 2 to 3 cups per day of red clover blossom infusion was the traditional preparation. It can also be incorporated into tinctures or dried and encapsulated. Think of red clover as the field that fed both the animals and the women who tended them, a plant so common, so taken for granted, that its gifts were hiding in plain sight all along. Number 7. Warm wood. The ancient parasite fighter here is where things get interesting. Because number 7, wormwood, carries a compound that modern researchers have studied with extraordinary attention, and the implications are significant enough that several large pharmaceutical companies have spent considerable resources trying to develop synthetic versions of what this plant already produces naturally. Wormwood, Artemisia absinthium, and its cousin Artemisia annua, has been used in traditional medicine for over 3,500 years. Ancient Egyptian medical papyri from around 1550 BC list wormwood preparations for intestinal complaints. The ancient Chinese pharmacopoeia, going back to the Han Dynasty, includes sweet wormwood as a treatment for fever. And throughout medieval Europe, wormwood hung in doorways was considered protection against pestilence. The compound is artemisinin, and in the 1970s, a Chinese pharmacologist named Tu Yuyu, working with ancient Chinese texts, isolated artemisinin from sweet wormwood and demonstrated its remarkable efficacy against malaria. She was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2015 for this discovery. The entire modern artemisinin-based antimalarial treatment protocol traces its lineage directly to a plant that ancient Chinese healers had been using for 2 millennia, beyond its antiparasitic applications. Wormwood has been traditionally used to support digestive function, specifically bile production, and the motility of the digestive tract, and emerging research is exploring its constituents in other contexts. The bitter compounds in wormwood, known as absinthin and artabsin, stimulate digestive secretions when taken before meals. Wormwood is easy to grow as a perennial herb. A small amount of dried leaf steeped briefly, no more than 1 teaspoon in a cup of water, makes a bitters preparation traditionally taken before meals for digestive support. Use it carefully and in moderation. Prolonged high-dose use is not recommended. Think of wormwood as the plant the Nobel Committee finally got around to acknowledging 2,000 years after Chinese physicians had already figured it out. Number 8. Yarrow. The battlefield herb. The botanical name of yarrow is Achillea millefolium. Achillea, because according to Greek mythology, the hero Achilles used this plant to staunch the bleeding wounds of his soldiers on the fields of Troy. Whether Achilles was real or mythological, the story tells us something important. Yarrow has been associated with wound care for so long that it became embedded in foundational myths of Western civilization. Archaeological evidence suggests yarrow was used medicinally by Neanderthals. Pollen from the plant was found at a Neanderthal burial site in Iraq, estimated to be over 60,000 years old. Native American tribes across the continent used it for fevers, pain, and wound treatment. It appears in European folk medicine, Chinese traditional medicine, and Ayurvedic herbalism. Very few plants have such a continuous and cross-cultural medicinal record. Yarrow contains achillene, a compound that has demonstrated hemostatic properties, meaning it supports the coagulation cascade and helps stop bleeding. It also contains flavonoids and volatile oils with anti-inflammatory and mild antimicrobial properties. Research has shown that preparations of yarrow may reduce inflammation markers and support immune function. Yarrow grows like a weed in most temperate gardens because it essentially is one. It spreads readily, tolerates poor soil, and produces its flat-topped clusters of white or pink flowers through most of the summer. Fresh yarrow leaves, pressed against a minor cut, can help slow bleeding. Yarrow tea, a tablespoon of dried aerial parts steeped in hot water for 10 minutes, has been used traditionally for fevers, colds, and digestive complaints. Think of yarrow as the plant that has been walking beside soldiers, farmers, and healers for longer than recorded history, asking nothing in return, asking only that you remember it when you need it. Number 9. Lemon balm. The anxiety whisperer in the monastic gardens of medieval Europe, lemon balm occupied a place of particular importance. The Benedictines brewed it in their Carmelite water, a preparation that circulated through European royal courts from the 14th century onward, and that was prescribed for nervous complaints, melancholy, and what we would today recognize as anxiety and mild depression. Paracelsus, the Renaissance physician who bridged alchemy and medicine, called lemon balm the elixir of life. He recommended it daily. Lemon balm, Melissa officinalis, works primarily through its rosmarinic acid content and a range of volatile terpenoids that appear to inhibit an enzyme called GABA transaminase, thereby increasing the availability of GABA in the brain. This is the same neurotransmitter system that valerian influences, and together, the two herbs have a long history of combined use for sleep and anxiety that modern research has begun to validate. Clinical trials have shown that lemon balm extract may significantly reduce symptoms of anxiety and insomnia, with one double-blind study reporting a 33% reduction in anxiety scores and a 42% reduction in insomnia symptoms in participants taking standardized lemon balm extract for 15 days. Lemon balm is one of the most cheerful and generous plants in any garden. It spreads enthusiastically, releases its lovely citrus fragrance at the slightest touch, and begins growing vigorously from early spring. A handful of fresh leaves in a cup of hot water, steeped 5 minutes and taken in the evening, is one of the simplest and most pleasant medicinal teas you can make. And wait until you hear about number 14, because what lemon balm begins, that plant completes in ways that will surprise you. Think of lemon balm as the gentle hand on the shoulder, the one that quietly reminds a racing mind that stillness is still possible. Number 10. Ashwagandha. The root that remembers strength in Sanskrit. The name ashwagandha means smell of the horse because its root has a distinctive earthy, horse-like aroma, and because the ancient Ayurvedic texts promised that one who took it regularly would gain the strength and vitality of a horse. That is not metaphor. The Charaka Samhita, one of the foundational texts of Ayurvedic medicine, compiled around 100 AD, lists ashwagandha as a rasayana, a class of herbs used for longevity, vitality, and the rejuvenation of the body and mind. Ashwagandha, Withania somnifera, belongs to the same adaptogen category as holy basil. Its primary active constituents are a group of steroidal lactones called withanolides, which appear to modulate the body's stress response by influencing cortisol production, reducing inflammation, and supporting thyroid and adrenal function. The clinical research on ashwagandha has grown substantially in recent years. Randomized controlled trials have found that ashwagandha supplementation may reduce cortisol levels by up to 27%, improve resistance to stress, and support muscle strength and recovery, with some studies reporting improvements in muscle mass and recovery time of 15 to 20% compared to placebo. Research also suggests potential benefits for thyroid function, male reproductive health, and cognitive performance under stress. Ashwagandha can be grown in warm climates. It is a subtropical shrub native to India and North Africa. In cooler climates, it can be grown as an annual or in containers brought indoors over winter. The root is typically dried and powdered. The traditional preparation, called ashwagandha milk, involves stirring half a teaspoon of the powder into warm whole milk with honey and a pinch of cardamom, taken before bed. Think of ashwagandha as the root that remembers what it meant to be strong and offers that memory back to a body that has been worn down by the relentless demands of modern life. Real quick, if you're finding this valuable, if you're starting to see that the plants your great-grandparents grew were not superstition, but science, hit that like button. It costs you nothing, and it helps this video reach the people who need it most. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button and ring the bell. We post every week, and we're building a community of people who are done being dependent on an industry that profits from their confusion. All right, we're only halfway through, and the best ones are still ahead. Let's keep going. Number 11, Calendula, the skin's oldest friend in 12th century Germany. A Benedictine abbess named Hildegard von Bingen compiled one of the most comprehensive herbal medical texts of the medieval period. In it, she wrote extensively about calendula, the bright orange and yellow pot marigold that still grows in gardens across the world today. She prescribed it for skin conditions, wound healing, and internal inflammation. She was working from a tradition that stretched back through Roman herbalism, through ancient Egypt, through India, where calendula had been used in garlands and medicines for thousands of years. Calendula officinalis, contains a remarkable array of active compounds, flavonoids, saponins, polysaccharides, and triterpenoids that work together to produce anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and vulnerary, wound healing effects. The saponins in particular appear to stimulate collagen synthesis, supporting the repair of damaged skin. Research has demonstrated that calendula preparations may significantly accelerate wound healing compared to other commonly used preparations. One trial found that a calendula ointment led to wound closure approximately 25% faster than petroleum jelly in post-surgical wounds. Studies also support its use for diaper dermatitis, eczema, and radiation-induced skin reactions in oncology patients. Calendula is one of the easiest flowers you can grow. It blooms prolifically from seed, self-seeds enthusiastically, and will produce flowers from spring until the first hard frost. To make a simple calendula oil, pack a jar loosely with dried calendula flowers. Cover completely with olive oil, seal, and place in a warm, sunny window for 4 to 6 weeks. Strain and use topically for dry skin, minor burns, rashes, and wound care. Think of calendula as the sun distilled into a flower, warm, persistent, and entirely devoted to the repair of what has been damaged. Number 12, hawthorn. The heart's ancient guardian for over 1,000 years, the hawthorn tree stood at the boundary between cultivated land and wild nature across the British Isles and Europe. It was considered sacred, a threshold tree, a guardian tree, and the people who lived closest to the land noticed something about the old women who regularly made teas and tonics from hawthorn berries and blossoms. They tended to have good hearts. Not figuratively, literally. Their hearts seemed to hold longer. Hawthorn, Crataegus species, has been used in Chinese traditional medicine for cardiovascular support for at least 2,000 years. In European herbalism, it has been a primary cardiac herb since at least the Middle Ages, and the modern pharmacological investigation of hawthorn has, largely, confirmed what those generations of healers observed. Hawthorn's active constituents include oligomeric proanthocyanidins and flavonoids, particularly vitexin and hyperoside, that appear to improve coronary blood flow, reduce peripheral vascular resistance, and have antioxidant effects on the cardiovascular system. Research has shown that hawthorn extract may improve exercise tolerance in people with mild heart failure, reduce symptoms such as shortness of breath and fatigue, and support healthy blood pressure. A meta-analysis of multiple trials found that hawthorn extract produced a significant reduction in maximum workload tolerance, meaning the heart was able to work more efficiently in individuals with early-stage cardiovascular concerns. Improvements in key measures were observed across studies consistently. Hawthorn grows as a large shrub or small tree, hardy in most temperate climates. Both the berries and the blossoms are medicinal. A simple hawthorn berry tea, 1 tablespoon of dried berries simmered in 2 cups of water for 20 minutes, is a traditional daily tonic. If you are on heart medications, speak with your healthcare provider before regular use. Think of hawthorn as the guardian tree that stood at the edge of the village for 1,000 years, and that has been quietly watching over hearts long before anyone invented a drug to replace it. Number 13. Stinging nettle. The mineral powerhouse there is an irony in the story of stinging nettle. Here is a plant so nutritionally dense that some researchers have called it one of the most complete foods in the plant kingdom. Rich in iron, calcium, magnesium, potassium, silicon, and vitamins A, C, and K. A plant that has fed rural populations through famines, that has been used in textile production for thousands of years, that features in the folk medicine of virtually every culture in the Northern Hemisphere. And yet most people's primary relationship with it is pain. They brush against it, get stung, and give it a wide berth forever after. That sting, incidentally, is itself medicinal. The formic acid, serotonin, and histamine in the stinging hairs have been deliberately applied to arthritic joints in a practice called urtication, essentially deliberate stinging, that has been documented across European and Native American healing traditions, and that some modern research suggests may reduce joint pain through counter-irritant mechanisms. Beyond urtication, dried or cooked nettles lose their sting entirely and become extraordinary nutrition. Research has demonstrated that nettle root extract may significantly reduce symptoms of benign prostatic hyperplasia, the enlarged prostate condition that affects a large proportion of men over 50, with some trials showing symptom reductions comparable to pharmaceutical options, but with far fewer side effects. Nettles grow prolifically in rich, moist soil and are nearly impossible to kill once established. Harvest young tops in spring with gloves, then blanch in boiling water for 1 minute to neutralize the sting. Use in soups, pestos, egg dishes, anywhere you would use spinach. The flavor is deep, rich, and green in a way that processed food cannot replicate. Think of stinging nettle as the plant that asks you to approach it carefully and that rewards that care with more nourishment than almost anything else you could grow. Number 14. Passion flower, the nervous system's hidden restorer. And here we arrive at number 14, the one I mentioned when we were talking about lemon balm. Because if lemon balm is the gentle hand on the shoulder, passion flower is what lies down beside you in the dark and says, "You can let go now." Passion flower, Passiflora incarnata, is native to the southeastern United States, where Cherokee, Huma, and other Native American nations used it for anxiety, insomnia, and what they described as a restlessness of the spirit. When European settlers encountered it in the 17th century, they named it for the Passion of Christ, seeing in its unusual flower structure the symbols of the crucifixion. It entered European herbal medicine and remained there for centuries. The active compounds in passion flower, principally cresin, isovitexin, and other flavonoids, appear to interact with GABA receptors and to inhibit the reuptake of GABA, producing anxiolytic and sedative effects. This is strikingly similar to the mechanism of benzodiazepine drugs, without, apparently, the dependency risk. A clinical trial comparing passion flower extract to a low-dose pharmaceutical anxiolytic found comparable reductions in anxiety symptoms over a 28-day period, with the passion flower group reporting fewer side effects related to job performance and cognitive impairment. Another study found significant improvements in sleep quality in participants who took passion flower tea for 7 consecutive nights. Passion flower is a vigorous climbing vine that produces spectacular blooms and, in warmer climates, edible fruit. In cooler zones, grow it as a container plant. Steep 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried aerial parts in hot water for 10 minutes for an evening tea. It combines beautifully with lemon balm and valerian. Think of passion flower as the one that was growing wild in American meadows for thousands of years before anyone thought to put it in a pill. And that works better than the pill for more people in their own garden. Number 15. FEW. The migraine's old enemy. The reason they don't teach you about feverfew is frankly economic. Migraine is one of the most profitable conditions in modern pharmaceutical management. Drugs targeting this condition represent billions of dollars annually. And here, growing quietly in gardens across the British Isles and Northern Europe for over 2,000 years, is a small daisy-like plant that medieval physicians used for exactly this purpose, and that modern research has repeatedly confirmed can work. Feverfew, Tanacetum parthenium, was documented by the ancient Greek physician Dioscorides as useful for headaches and inflammation. In the English folk medicine tradition, the practice of eating 1 or 2 fresh feverfew leaves daily between slices of bread to prevent migraines was commonplace for centuries. And then, in the 1970s and 80s, several British clinical trials put that practice to scientific scrutiny. The active compound is parthenolide, which appears to inhibit platelet aggregation, reduce the release of serotonin from platelets, and inhibit the inflammatory prostaglandin synthesis. All mechanisms directly relevant to migraine pathophysiology. Multiple clinical trials have found that regular daily use of feverfew may reduce the frequency of migraine attacks by 24 to 32%, and several studies showed reductions in severity and associated nausea as well. Feverfew grows easily as a short-lived perennial in most gardens. The traditional dose, 1 to 2 fresh leaves per day, wrapped in bread or taken in capsule form, requires only a small plant. Do not take if pregnant, as feverfew may stimulate uterine contractions. Think of feverfew as the quiet protest growing in the garden against the idea that pain management requires a prescription, a protest that has been growing there for 2,000 years. Number 16. Motherwort. The women's herb here is a plant whose very name tells you who it was for. Motherwort, Leonurus cardiaca, has been used in European herbal tradition since at least the medieval period, specifically for women's health and for heart palpitations associated with anxiety and nervous tension. The German abbess Hildegard von Bingen wrote about it. The English herbalist Nicholas Culpeper, writing in the 17th century, called it of singular use for trembling of the heart. In Chinese traditional medicine, its cousin Leonurus japonicus, called Yimu cow, has been used for over 2,000 years in gynecological applications. The active constituents include leonorine, a compound unique to this plant genus, and iridoids and alkaloids that appear to have mild uterotonic, cardiac, and nervine effects. Leonorine has been studied for its ability to relax smooth muscle, including uterine smooth muscle, and to modulate heart rate in the context of palpitations associated with anxiety. Research suggests that motherwort preparations may support menstrual regularity, reduce the distress associated with palpitations from anxiety, and have mild diuretic and anti-inflammatory properties. It has a long traditional use as a herb for the anxiety heart palpitation complex, the racing, fluttering heart that accompanies panic and fear. Motherwort grows as a perennial herb in full sun to partial shade, reaching up to 4 feet tall. It self-seeds freely. A standard preparation is a tea of dried aerial parts, 1 teaspoon steeped 10 minutes. Note, do not use if pregnant, as it is euterotonic. Think of motherwort as the herb that knew, long before the field of psychosomatic medicine existed, that the heart and the nervous system speak the same language. Number 17. Kava, the anxiety medicine that was almost taken from you. And here we arrive at number 17. the one I promised you. Because the story of kava is, perhaps more than any other plant on this list, a story of what happens when a safe, effective, culturally important plant medicine threatens a profitable pharmaceutical category. Kava, Piper methysticum, has been cultivated and used ceremonially and medicinally in the Pacific Islands, Fiji, Vanuatu, Tonga, Samoa, Hawaii, for at least 3,000 years. In these cultures, kava ceremonies are not recreational. They are acts of community, of diplomacy, of healing. The root is prepared as a drink that produces calm, sociability, and relief from anxiety and tension without impairing cognitive function the way alcohol does. In the 1990s and early 2000s, kava preparations became popular in Europe and North America as a natural anxiolytic. Then, in 2002, regulatory agencies in Germany and Canada issued restrictions on kava products, citing reports of liver toxicity. Sales collapsed. The herb was largely removed from the European market. What subsequent investigation revealed, and what has been extensively documented since, is that the overwhelming majority of the hepatotoxicity cases involved either poor quality extracts made from non-traditional plant parts, products adulterated with other substances, or used alongside alcohol or pharmaceutical hepatotoxins. Traditional aqueous preparations of the root, water-based kava, as consumed in Pacific Island communities for thousands of years, have an extensive safety record. A comprehensive review of the toxicological literature supports the conclusion that traditional use kava is substantially safer than the products that were recalled. The traditional preparation involves grinding or pounding the dried root and steeping it in cold water, then straining. 1 to 2 cups taken in the evening has been the traditional approach. High quality, traditionally prepared kava from reputable sources is once again available in many markets. Think of kava as the ancient ceremony that was nearly buried not by evidence but by a narrative, and that the people who revered it for 3,000 years never stopped brewing. Number 18. Dandelion, the liver and kidney tonic you're trying to kill every spring across millions of lawns. People reach for bottles of herbicide. They apply poison to their gardens. They pull and dig and curse. And the object of all this effort is a plant that contains more beta-carotene than carrots, more calcium than milk by weight, more iron than spinach, and has been used as liver and kidney tonic medicine by virtually every culture that has encountered it for over 1,000 years. Dandelion, Taraxacum officinale, features in the traditional medicine of the Arabs, who brought their medical knowledge into medieval Europe, in ancient Chinese medicine, in the herbalism of Native American nations from coast to coast, and in the folk medicine of every European rural tradition. The entire plant is medicinal, the root for liver support, the leaf for kidney and diuretic function, the flower for antioxidant nutrition. The root contains inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria, as well as bitter sesquiterpene lactones that stimulate bile production and liver function. The leaves contain potassium in sufficient concentration to compensate for the potassium loss caused by their diuretic effect, something that pharmaceutical diuretics notably do not do. Research suggests that dandelion root extract may reduce inflammatory markers, support healthy blood sugar metabolism, and demonstrate antioxidant activity comparable to several commercially promoted supplements. Studies on the leaf suggest meaningful diuretic activity in human subjects. You probably already have dandelion. The question is whether you're treating it as the medicine it is, or the weed it isn't. Young spring leaves can be eaten in salads. The root, dried and roasted, makes a coffee substitute that also happens to be a liver tonic. The flowers can be made into a traditional wine or infused vinegar. Think of dandelion as the most freely given gift in nature, a pharmacy that asks only that you stop trying to destroy it. Number 19. Echinacea, the Great Plains healer before the European settlement of the North American continent. The indigenous peoples of the Great Plains used echinacea, the purple coneflower, more than almost any other medicinal plant. Historical records from ethnobotanists in the 19th century document its use by at least 14 different Native American nations for a remarkable range of conditions: wound treatment, snake bite, toothache, respiratory infection, and as a general strengthener of the body's resistance to illness. European settlers learned of echinacea from indigenous people and by the late 19th century, it was one of the most widely prescribed herbs in North America, used by both herbalists and conventional physicians. It was largely displaced by antibiotics in the mid-20th century, but it never disappeared. Echinacea works through multiple immune-modulating mechanisms. Its active compounds, alkamides, polysaccharides, and cichoric acid, appear to stimulate phagocytic activity, the immune system's ability to engulf and destroy pathogens, increase production of cytokines that coordinate the immune response, and have direct antiviral and antibacterial properties. A meta-analysis of 24 randomized controlled trials found that echinacea preparations reduced the incidence of the common cold by approximately 58% and reduced the duration of colds by up to 1.4 days compared to placebo. The evidence is strongest for standardized preparations of Echinacea purpurea aerial parts and root. Echinacea is a hardy, beautiful perennial that grows in most temperate garden settings. It blooms in summer with striking purple flowers that attract pollinators. At the first sign of a cold, a tincture or tea of Echinacea aerial parts or root, taken several times daily for up to 10 days, is the traditional approach. Think of Echinacea as the sentinel that the Great Plains peoples placed between themselves and illness for centuries, a guardian that is still willing to stand there for you if you will only plant it. Number 20. Saffron, the golden thread of healing, and we arrive, finally, at number 20. And I told you it would be remarkable, because saffron, the most expensive spice in the world by weight, the bright crimson stigmas of Crocus sativus, has been cultivated and revered since the Bronze Age. The ancient Minoans depicted saffron harvest in their frescoes around 1600 BC. Ancient Persians used it in their ceremonial textiles and medicines. The Egyptians prized it. Cleopatra, according to historical accounts, bathed in saffron-infused water. The ancient Greeks attributed its discovery to the gods themselves and built sacred spaces in which it was honored. For most of recorded history, saffron was understood to elevate the mood, sharpen the mind, and comfort the grieving spirit. The ancient Persian medical tradition prescribed it for melancholy, what we would today call depression. And it is in this application that the modern science of saffron has produced some of its most remarkable findings. The active compounds in saffron, principally crocin, crostine, and saffronol, appear to modulate serotonin, dopamine, and glutamate neurotransmitter systems. Research has demonstrated that saffron supplementation may have antidepressant effects comparable to low-dose pharmaceutical antidepressants, with multiple clinical trials showing improvements in depression symptom scores of 25 to 35%, comparable in magnitude to standard drug treatments, but without the side effect profile of sexual dysfunction, weight gain, and emotional blunting that those drugs commonly produce. Saffron crocus can be grown in most temperate gardens. The corms are planted in summer and bloom in autumn, producing beautiful purple flowers whose stigmas are harvested by hand. A small garden can yield enough saffron for culinary and medicinal use. The traditional medicinal dose is 30 milligrams of dried saffron daily, achievable from a pinch of genuine saffron added to warm milk, tea, or food. Think of saffron as the golden thread that runs through 600 years of human suffering and healing. A plant so precious, so potent, and so old that its story is the story of civilization itself, learning to take care of its own heart. Here's what every single plant on this list has in common. None of them require a prescription. None of them were invented in a laboratory 50 years ago. None of them need to be manufactured, packaged, shipped, and marked up by a distribution chain that ends at a checkout counter. Every single one of them can be grown, in most cases, in an ordinary garden bed, a windowsill planter, or a corner of a yard, and every single one of them has been known, understood, and used by human beings for anywhere from 500 to 600 years. Here is the uncomfortable truth that this list points toward: the knowledge of how to maintain and restore health using the plants that grow from the same earth we walk on. That knowledge is as old as humanity itself. It was accumulated not by corporations or regulatory agencies or pharmaceutical companies. It was accumulated by grandmothers and monks and shamans and farmers and midwives and healers who had no financial incentive to tell you anything other than the truth of what worked at some point in the last 100 years. We collectively agreed to outsource that knowledge to an industry that profits from selling it back to us in patented form. And much of what was lost in that arrangement, much of what was quietly discouraged, labeled dangerous, buried under warning language, was not lost because it didn't work. It was lost because it worked too well, and it grew too freely, and no one could own it. This is not medical advice. Always speak with a qualified professional before making changes, especially if you're pregnant, nursing, or managing a health condition. The plants on this list are powerful, and power deserves respect and care. But here is what I want to leave you with. This knowledge belongs to you. It always did. It lived in the garden your grandmother kept. It was in the remedies that passed from mother to daughter, across generations, that had no access to doctors, and yet survived. It is in the ancient texts of every civilization that ever tried to write down what they had learned about staying alive and well on this earth. No big industries created that knowledge, and no regulatory agency can take it from you. Not completely, not as long as people are willing to grow things, share things, and remember. Now, tell me in the comments, which plant on this list are you going to grow first? I read every single one. Your answer might be the thing that sends this video to someone who needs it. If you haven't subscribed, click that button and ring the bell. We post every week, and we are, together, building something that the industry cannot build. A community that remembers, go plant something.